To honor America, please join in the singing of our national anthem.
A new campaign ad from Joe Biden blaming President Trump for putting America on the sidelines with the cancellation of sports.
I get that. Vice President mask mandate telling us it's the president's fault. Well, the president firing back, tweeting, quote, "The Dems don't want football back for political reasons, but are trying to blame me and the Republicans." Another lie, but this is what we are up against.
Here to react, Fox News analyst and Fox Nation host Lawrence Jones. What's up, Lawrence? Good to see you this morning. It is confusing, isn't it? Yeah. It is. If I look across the places that sports has been canceled, specifically, let's start with college football, the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Those are decisions being made in states largely run by Democratic governors. In fact, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has totally said the Big Ten made the right decision. So how will Joe Biden saddle President Trump with these decisions?
Yeah, that's a good point. First, I want to say condolences to the family of Chadwick Boseman. Definitely a hero of many of us, and definitely their family is in our thought and prayers. But just to pivot to, I don't understand what the play is on this, because it is clear when you see even teams like the Dallas Cowboys and other southern states saying, look, we can actually take the proper precautions to make this work. I think they're just hurting their own base. I think no matter what political ideology you are, you're a sports fan. And I think the people are more in tune to what's going on in the country than Democrats give them credit for. So I don't think this is the right line of attack for them. I think overall their message is that this is the president's fault when it comes to the coronavirus. But what we're seeing is a shift in the poll. I think, with every story that I go out and shoot, we always say, who is the villain of the story? Well, the president has been able to correctly identify China to be the villain of the story. And I think that's why some of the public polling is going. So people may be upset at football being canceled, but I think more people are starting to blame the government in China that did not let the world know that they had this virus going on.
Yeah, Lawrence, I want to ask you about the public perception of all this. I recently saw a poll that showed that the public, in large part, stands with the players in protest when they decide that they don't want to play right now, when they decide that they want conditions met, when they want to have an active voice in social justice. That was a little bit surprising to me, because I hear so many people all the time talking about how sports has gotten so political and it's a turnoff. So what do you think public sentiment really is on this issue right now?
I think that during the pandemic, a lot of people saw the abuses of the state, whether it was a mother that was taking her child to the playground and was arrested, or Luther, you had Luther just on from my great state of Texas, that her salon was shut down, to people that were abused by the state when it comes to losing their life, or the bad apples of police brutality. And I think that shifted public sentiment. And so I do think people do stand with the players. Now, do they want to see some action? Of course they want to see some action. You can't just have a protest. You got to have a list of ideas that you're going to govern by. You're going to change policy. So this really doesn't surprise me at all, because the country has moved on this issue.
Lawrence, I want to expand on that a little bit, because you've talked about abuse of government power and how the black community oftentimes feels like and is perceived differently by some quarters of law enforcement. But how do you advance the conversation without acknowledging that, Jacob Blake was violating a restraining order? He had a sexual assault warrant out. He had a knife or didn't have a knife. He put one of the officers in a headlock. They tried to use a taser twice. He was resisting arrest for minutes. That almost is never included when we're talking about justice in the situation. Why not? And how do you reconcile that?
Well, justice is also due process. And so a defense is going to be mounted, and that case is going to be made. But, you still have people that still debate on whether George Floyd should have died or not. Some people have blamed it on the drugs that were in his system, when we have autopsies that suggest otherwise, when we have a video. And so, yes, I think it is adequate. It is correct to say officers deserve due process. They deserve to mount a defense, and we deserve as a public to hear all the facts. But then others would push back and say, well, even when the evidence is so convincing, even though we have a video, you still have people that go on air and still say, oh, well, it was the drugs in his system that killed him.
You know, I am surprised at that poll that Jedediah referenced just a moment ago about the way the public feels about sports embracing politics. Lawrence, I want to read you a joint statement from the NBA and the NBA Players Association. This is part of what they have hoped to accomplish, have agreed to accomplish. In every city where the league franchise owns and controls the arena property, team governors will continue to work with local election officials to convert the facility into a voting location for the 2020 general election to allow for safe in-person voting in vulnerable communities. I saw you earlier this week. You and I spoke privately. I certainly respect the players' conviction. But what I wonder is, when politics is infused with sports, I guess that's fine unless it's only one side of the political message. I just wonder if this whole process of encouraging voting at certain NBA facilities and sports being infused with politics, if there's not an underlying message of, but vote our way.
Well, it may be. And I think that we should meet them on the battlefield of ideas and say, well, this is our message as well. And I think that's one of the problems that I have with the right now, is that the message of liberty, due process, that's our message. We should be saying this is where we stand on, you know, the fact that Rand Paul, I mean, I'm a libertarian, people know that. Rand Paul was attacked when he has been the guy that's been against the state's abuse of power. It's very concerning to me that people don't know that. Whether it's the FISA court, whether it's the criminal justice, the guy is pro-legalization of all drugs. He's gone against the police state. He's gone, I mean, if they wanted a champion for someone that's going to go out there and fight for their civil liberties, it would be Rand Paul.
But he supports Trump, Lawrence. That's his sin. In their mind, everything is justified because, well, Trump is racist, therefore anyone who supports him must be racist. The conversation doesn't go any further than that.
Well, the conversation stops at racism for a lot of people. And I think the president, the best way to end all of that is to go to the people himself. He cannot just allow the media to paint a picture of him. He got to say, look, you're forgotten as well. I understand you. I didn't just accomplish criminal justice reform, but I'm getting ready to tackle the next issue at hand as well. And I think if the president can go and talk to his American citizens, he can bypass all the misconceptions that may people that may assume that he's racist or doesn't care about black folks. He can bypass all of that by going straight to his people, the American people.
Certainly did that with the convention, too.
Lawrence Jones, my fellow libertarian, thanks for being here. As always, a much-needed voice at this time.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Y'all take care.